The Granliden Hotel, lofty mistress of Lake Sunapee for more than half a century, towered from her slope of pines, the translation of her Norwegian name. Farmer and Civil War veteran Josiah Scott had acquired 160 acres of farmland from Samuel Gardner on the west shore of Lake Sunapee in 1873. 10 acres of that land was sold to a Dr. Arthur Nilsson of New York City in 1889. In 1896, it was Dr. Nilsson who persuaded two sisters from Springfield, Massachusetts, Annie and Carolyn Covell, to purchase Scott's 118-acre farm, where they established a so-called family boarding house. Nilsson also persuaded the sisters to call their new venture Granliden. In their small hotel, the Covell sisters could host what was noted as the right kind of working girls from the city for summer vacations beginning in 1897, adding a laundry and several freestanding cottages. Reports of the glories of summer vacations by the lake spread quickly by word of mouth, and demand was such that the Covells enlarged the small hotel several times until, in 1905, they turned it into the Grand Hotel of cherished memory. From the beginning, this ornate gabled structure, designed by Bassett Jones, a New York architect, offered many amenities. Early brochures tout not only the comforts of hardwood floors, electric lighting, steam heat, and the Waring drainage system, but also fine dining, excellent stables with driving and saddle horses, golf links, tennis courts, a sand beach, and rowboats for the guests to use. Woodsum Company steamboats delivered guests who came by train to Lake Sunapee Station in Newbury. By 1918, the annual brochure was promising professional instruction in horseback riding and swimming, a fleet of 30 rowboats, 25 canoes, and gray court launches for hire. Of all the hotels on the lake, it was rumored that Granliden was the best. In its heyday, the hotel accommodated 250 guests in grand style, with all-inclusive room and board rates in 1932 starting at $6 a day or $35 per week. However, the hotel would sometimes offer lower rates to young single men so that young ladies could have dancing partners. The brochures also promised an orchestra which would perform morning concerts and play for dancing during afternoon tea as well as evenings. The original Scott farmhouse, which had been moved away from the main building, became the home for the musicians. It was to this setting that Giovanni Tallarico, an accomplished cellist, at the invitation of his good friend Dr. Nilsson, came to Granliden to serve as musical director from 1920 to 1932. Not surprisingly, Victor and Ernest Tallarico, sons of Giovanni and his piano teacher wife Constance, were also gifted musicians. After his father's retirement, Victor was hired to be Granliden's orchestra leader in 1941 and 1942, and for 4 years after his service in World War II. Again, the ensemble was small, Victor on piano, Ernest on sax, plus a drummer and bass, but the sound was large and gave the patrons the chance to relax to the tunes of Kern and Gershwin or kick up their heels to the dance tunes of the day.
My memories of my father and my uncle as musicians in Sunapee. At our resort at Traurico, we had dinners. When we served dinners, my father and my uncle would have to then get ready to play the hotels. Sunapee, Granliden, Indian Cave. And it was a very fond memory. Many times after Uncle Ernie would put his allspice on, and my father, when he'd put on his Menon aftershave, they would smother me in it, and I'd smell like them all night long. And then they'd get dressed up, and it was just amazing to see how different they were from day work to night. And they'd go to the hotel a couple of nights a week, and then my mom and my aunt would follow later, and I'd watch my mom get dressed. And some of the things she used to do that I just loved was she had the most unusual, unbelievable earrings. I just remember all her choices and her clothes, and they were unusual. So I have her earrings in this collection, and I have the smells and the memories of my father. It's an era gone by.
The backstory of my family's times at Granliden. Well, here's what I know. My grandfather, Convis Markham, was a doctor, and he suffered from terrible allergies. So every August he took his family somewhere in the mountains to get away from whatever was causing him to sneeze. And several years they came to Sunapee, 1 year at Sunapee Lodge and 2 years at the Granliden Hotel. My grandfather loved golf. In the video, you can see him teeing off in his knee-length golfing pants. One of their summer visits was in 1929, because we have a Granliden Championship trophy with his name on it from that year. My grandmother, Susie Markham, also played golf, and we have some ladies' irons which we think my mother may have used. My mother, Peggy, was the oldest of their 3 girls. She would have been 12 to 14 years old. She remembered dressing up and walking down the stone stairs, which you now can see outside the Valley's house. And they would go there to show off their finery before dinner. She also talked about taking the steamboats to the other hotels around the lake to dance to their orchestras. She and her sisters rode the hotel horses, and the riding program was managed out of our barn by Dave Little's grandfather. She also remembers the regatta down in the harbor as a grand event to which everyone went, and of course swimming in the lake by the original boathouse. She loved coming to visit us here at Granliden because when she stayed here it brought back all the memories of her childhood visits to the Granliden Hotel.
My connection to the Granliden Hotel goes back 3 generations to my great-grandfather Charles E. Shepherd, who owned a riding academy and a set of other businesses in New London. And if you were staying at the Granliden Hotel and you were interested in a riding lesson, or if you were interested in just going on a day riding trip, you would use one of his horses and one of his instructors. And one of his jobs was to get the horses around the lake from New London over to the Granliden Hotel and the other hotels. And my father, Arthur Little, was recruited as a 12-year-old to take the riding stock from the main stable over on Main Street, New London, around the lake, and he would leave New London riding one horse and leading 2 or 3 others, and then he would show up at the Granliden Hotel or at one of the other hotels and drop off 3 or 4 horses and then take 3 or 4 horses from that location to another hotel. Apparently, as a 12 and 13 and 14-year-old, one of the attractions for my dad for delivering horses to the Granliden Hotel was that behind me, bordering Granliden's beachfront, is the Weathers estate, and a young lady that he thought was quite attractive back in his early teens was Marion Weathers Grassy. And so he always made sure that if horses needed to be taken to the Granliden Hotel, he always made sure that he was available to bring them over here on the off chance that he might get a glimpse or maybe a couple of words with Marion Weathers as she was either at the family compound or up at the Granliden Hotel. 24 years after the Granliden Hotel closed down, and about 10 years after it was torn down, I showed up here looking for a job as the superintendent of the golf course, and worked here for 5 years in that position, and then took time off to do contracting work, but then came back here in 1990 and as general manager, and have been happily here as general manager for the last 25 years. So my family history continues to go on at Granliden, and the entire family has enjoyed our association with both hotel and the Granliden on Sunapee community.
Many of the Granliden pines fell during the 1938 hurricane. A hotel carriage is a thing of the past. The Armenia White and the Lady Woodsome steamers which brought guests to Granliden have docked for the last time. The whistle of a train bringing guests to Sunapee from the cities is only a memory. The caddy camp, the livery stable and bridle path, and the dancing to the music of an orchestra in the ballroom have all been relegated to another era. The slow decline of the grand hotels started with the invention of the gasoline engine, which enabled people to drive to any destination they wished. In 1954, the Granliden Hotel closed its doors, and the Society of Jesus, a Jesuit order, bought Granliden to use as a summer retreat. It was sold in 1966 to a developer, and thus marked the start of the Granliden community that we know today. But Granliden will always be the slope with pines on the shore of Lake Sunapee. And the grandeur that was the Granliden Hotel will endure through the wonder of images and the power of memory.